Good evening. Welcome to a Select Board workshop. Today is Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. I'm going to call the workshop to order and just make note that we do have Christopher Hansen, Derek Ray, and at the time Sam Gifford is not here, and then I, Kayla Gonzalez, am here. I'm going to ask that we get a little intro into our first ordinance that we're looking at.
So, good evening, board members. My name is Brett Wimkin, contract planner with the town. I'll start us off with the parking for the short-term rentals. So within our proposed short-term rental ordinance, we do make reference to the land use ordinance and off-street parking standards. That was something that had come up during the public comment for the short-term rental was concerns about off-street parking. So this is more so, I would call it housekeeping of making sure that we are defining what a short-term rental is within our land use ordinance, as well as accounting for those off-street parking standards. So the closest aligning use for short-term rental within our existing land use ordinance would match that boarding or lodging houses, hotels or motels that would require one space for each sleeping room. So that was where the board had felt the most appropriate place for that was. And then again, those definitions for those terms defined below, those mimic exactly for what's within the short-term rental ordinance.
Okay, thank you. I think probably the best way to sort of go about this in a concise manner, if everybody's agreeable, is we just sort of look at it and say, basically, by a show of hands, are we comfortable with the language in here? And we can take it by chunks. This one is pretty short and sweet. So how do we feel about the addition of this one?
The first part, 309.3 off-street parking. The addition of the short-term rental, I'm fine with. The terms defined, all those definitions would only apply, Brett, I believe, if we adopted the short-term rental ordinance.
Yes, I think the benefit of including them as well is if the short-term rental ordinance were to not pass, at least we are still classifying and defining that type of use within the town, whereas currently we don't have one.
I am in agreement with that. I had some comments I want to make about these, but I'm going to wait until we discuss the short-term rental ordinance. And if those changes are incorporated, then we would make the changes here.
Right, I see.
Other than that, I'm good with it.
Yeah, same. I like the idea to talk about it and have it separate in case the two things fail, because I think this is one that everyone was kind of in agreement on both sides, so it's nice to keep that in there no matter what happens.
Okay, I guess this one is just curious for me. Maybe it's because I'm thinking as a whole of what type of roads we have, and I think of off-street parking, and I just think, what if you have a 4-bedroom home, so that's 4 vehicles on the side of a dirt road? I don't know. It's just an observation on my point that it seems a little, I understand it matches all the language that we're using for other types of homes or tourist home boarding and lodging house. It just struck me as kind of like, oh, that's a lot of cars just sort of parked on the side. But
I think the term off-street is they can't park it on the street. They need to provide parking spaces.
Correct, yeah, they would
so
be
I'm looking
responsible.
at that wrong.
Just flip
Okay, flip it. Okay,
Yeah.
because I was like, that seems weird. Why are we allowing this? But
Right, like
Yeah.
for some municipalities, for example, if a short-term rental application was before the board, they'd be required to submit like a site plan that would show exactly where those parking spaces are. Similar to like for single-family homes, I know sometimes folks look at, how long the driveway is or if the garage can accommodate a vehicle. That way those cars aren't being parked on the lawn or along the street.
okay. So I guess in this case then, since I was confused about what this meant anyway, was if you have a 4-bedroom home and you're using that as a short-term rental, so you need to have dedicated 4 spaces, not on a lawn.
Right, yep, it would be within the driveway, a garage, or some kind of like a paver area kind of thing. Just anywhere that's not along the street, essentially.
Okay. And
How would that work?
how do we regulate that?
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question is, on a private way, how would you, like if it's a private road and they're parked on the road, and let's say they didn't have the driveway spaces, just say, go park in my private way. You can't really do much about it. Also, from an enforcement standpoint on a town right-of-way, without a police department, I think we could probably tow if we had an ordinance, but I don't know how you, I don't think you can issue parking tickets and tow
I hope
vehicles.
not.
No. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Nate can.
Oh, he's a constable.
Yeah.
Okay.
He can issue parking tickets. I don't know about towing. I don't think the town wants to get into the middle of
I think
towing.
you have to have an ordinance before you can start
Yeah.
exploring that, and it has to be posted. But yeah, essentially, I wonder if on a private way, you could just totally circumvent the parking requirement and just say, I'm on a private road, go park wherever.
Well, I think the way the short-term rental ordinance is written, you have to show that you have on-site parking, not on a private way. Because some of the complaints that I've heard are about people parking on private ways. They can't get through to get to their property. So I think if they're gonna have if we approve the short-term rental ordinance, one of the criteria is they have to show on-site parking for the 4 bedrooms and any guests that are parking at the site. So that would alleviate parking in the private way.
My other question on this is it's not clear if they can't prove that. Do they not get to rent, or do they have to rent, they have to advertise the amount of bedrooms that they have parking for, or like what's when it comes
That's
in
kind of my
opposite?
interpretation is, in your application.
If you have
to
3
show it,
spots, then you only
you
get
only have
3
3
bedrooms
spots,
you can advertise
3
for?
bedrooms,
Okay.
yep.
Not like, oh, you have a 4-bedroom, you're renting it, I mean, you're advertising a short term and you only have 3 spots, you can't rent it all. No go for you. I think that would be a,
Yeah, I think it's just.
You get some
knock
pushback
them
on that
down,
one.
Yeah.
Is there a definition somewhere in our ordinances that lay out what constitutes a parking space?
Yeah, what is it, by 20 foot by,
19 by
or-
8 in the street ordinance, isn't it?
is it 8 or 9? Maybe you're right.
Yeah, I-
No,
yeah.
I'm
we-
I'm in the
we-
I'm in the
Answer is
ballpark.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
But it's in the street.
it's always in between
the
that 18
street
to 20
standards.
and, yeah, so.
okay. All right. Any other comments or thoughts on this? Or just based on possible changes later tonight, we would then come back to this? Or ask that they be incorporated?
Well, I think tonight
into
is
this?
just, isn't it just a workshop
It's
on
just a
each one?
workshop, but,
So we're
like,
not gonna vote
getting
until.
feedback.
Right. So my feedback would be, I'm okay with it, and I'm okay with leaving in the short-term rental no matter what happens, because in the future, if we ever do adopt an ordinance, it's there. But these other ones would only apply if we approve the short-term rental ordinance at the next meeting, or the town approves it
Yep.
at town meeting is how
Yeah.
it would
I
actually.
think I see what you mean now, for like the sub definitions almost of the
Yeah,
primary.
because I got some comments
Gotcha.
on that, but I'm gonna
Okay.
wait until we get into the short-term
Yep,
rental ordinance.
I understand, gotcha.
All right. Do we feel comfortable moving on to the next one this time?
I do.
Okay, up next would be our proposed ordinance amendments within our land use ordinance related to medical cannabis and growing operations. So there's a couple definitions at the start of this that were pulled from state language. So this does align with state statute to differentiate what the indoor cultivation is, what those registered caregivers are, the difference between sun-grown and indoor. There's a little bit of a back and forth that we can get into in a minute. But this first section is defining those. The next is the district uses. So within all of our land use ordinance and shoreland zone, our shoreland zones, we would outline whether that's prohibited, conditional, and you don't see permitted on that list. And then following that would be performance standards that we would implement within our land use ordinance. So section A is our authority. Right now, Raymond is not an opt-in town. And so that first section for the authority is more just to delineate that and put that out front, stating that we're not opt-in. And then our performance standards for these types of uses would fall under section B. So the first one for enclosures and setbacks, this would apply to both sun-grown and indoor, where based on the quantity of plants, they would have different front, rear, and side yard setbacks. And you can see that within that table there, what those different thresholds are. This was discussed at the planning board level for, I would say, in depth about the number of plants and how or what type of smells that those can produce. And so that was something we had kind of workshopped quite a bit at the planning board level on those sun-grown outdoor grows versus the indoor grows. And then later on for that sub-bullet point number 2 for odor control, this is really more so geared towards the indoor cultivation uses where we would require those greenhouses or indoor growing operations to have some kind of odor control, some kind of carbon filtration system that would be operational to help kind of offset some of that odor. So, and then that last point for violation, that's more so to give Jason some teeth, is in case there is an issue that the town would have the ability to go out and pursue that. And that's the gist of it. So.
Okay. Just looking at the terminology, do any of you have questions or thoughts?
No, I think the definition's appropriate. As long as everybody understands that sun-grown cultivation, if you look at the chart below on the district uses, so Village Residential District is a more dense residential zone. It's only 40,000. So it's prohibited to do outdoor growing or sun growing there. And indoor is conditional. So if they had a greenhouse that was completely enclosed, they could do it, but they got to maintain odor control and meet the setbacks, and they'd have to go in front of the ZBA to get a conditional use. I think that's kind of where that goes. And a sun-grown cultivator, obviously, somebody that grows outside. Somebody that grows indoors is cultivation in a building, and that can be controlled with odor control. And if anybody doesn't understand what odor control is they use carbon scrubbers, and it brings the air into the carbon scrubber and takes the odor out and puts out better air. But it's something that has to be maintained, so even indoor scrubbers is kind of a enforcement issue that's going to be hard to enforce because we have to monitor whether they're doing maintenance on the scrubbers. It's not a one and done. Mm-hmm. So I'll just point that out.
That was one of my initial questions, was how you're going to enforce indoor odor control versus outdoor. But when you have it prohibited in some areas and not others, that makes more sense. So that, you can have it outdoors, but you're in a different zone. You have a bigger plot. You don't have as many homes around you. It's easier to keep that smell under control. Like, you're not going to stop it, but at least in those zones, that's why it's prohibited there. So that kind of correlates with this and makes sense.
And I think the reason it's prohibited in resource protection is that's not a place where we want business. Same thing with stream protection within 100 feet of a stream. Or resource protection is usually wetlands. We don't want people disturbing those areas.
Wouldn't that be the best growing spot?
Probably. But then now it's commercial use.
And probably
Fertilized differently. Not so good for the environment, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty spot on. Again, that was one of the primary factors in deciding which zones they went into, was the potential or the minimum lot acreage. And then it's also worth mentioning too, those setbacks are pretty restrictive in some of those zones even. There might be a property zoned as rural that might meet that acreage, but it might be a really long and skinny parcel that,
one row in the middle and that's all you get.
Right, but like those performance standards, those setbacks might be really difficult to meet, and it might not even be feasible to grow in those, and so that's where.
So that would force them into an indoor grow, where they could control the odor and control that space.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
why there's so much difference between an indoor grow and an outdoor grow and the setbacks for that.
Absolutely, and that's why those thresholds are different for those indoor grows, because that's the trade-off is, they would be required to have those odor mitigation systems.
So to Derek's point about enforcement, outdoor grows, my experience is I don't care if you're 1,000 feet from a large grow, you can smell it. So we're going to that's going to be a challenge for code enforcement, 150 feet or 100 feet. And then vegetative buffers or other proven cultivation practices that minimizes odors, I don't know of any. It's like a skunk. A skunk lets off and you can smell it for a quarter of a mile.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that's going to
Yeah.
change that.
It doesn't matter what tree you have on your property
No.
line or a fence. it's
So,
just
I mean, it's
smell
written
so-
as good as you could. I'm not criticizing that, but it's going to be an enforcement problem.
Yeah. The other benefit as well, with it being a conditional use, at least it has that extra layer of review by the town for the zoning board of
And maybe
appeals,
the
so-
ZBA could put some conditions on that if there are complaints, that it gets reviewed again, whatever they decide. But
Or
that's
if they
what
do-
conditional use is all about.
Yep, or if they do a site walk and there's some unique circumstances on site with the topography, or maybe there's a wind channel that just really blows through the property, and
Right.
there's so many different, unique things that could be going on there, but at least there's that added layer of review from the town.
And if it doesn't work, we always could look at just prohibiting it outright in the future.
Is this permitted? And then, if so, is it renewal or is it?
No, conditional use generally, as long as they're continuing it, would go
Right.
year to year.
It runs with the land.
Yeah, it kind of runs with the land, as long as they're maintaining, I guess, they'd have to stick to whatever plan they went with. If they were gonna move the plot somewhere on the property or increase the number of plants, then, they may have to come in for a new permit. But as long as they continue doing it in the plot with the numbers.
That's what I mean. If there's an issue with odor or violation or something, they would have to reapply for the permit after if it went wrong for them.
I mean, I would always try to
'Cause
reach
that's the
out.
only way to get. I mean, there's a little bit of teeth there, but
Yeah, I mean, I would always try to reach out first and say, hey, listen, we've had some complaints, before violation, write a warning
Yeah.
letter and say, let's try and figure this out before we have to escalate. And if it escalates, it escalates.
So I'd like to revisit the opt-in, opt-out section that you wrote.
Mhm.
What that means is we're not an opt-in town. That means we're not going to have any adult use marijuana facilities or stores. We're not opting in. If we did opt in, then that opens the door to have more medical marijuana stores and more adult use stores. And by enacting this ordinance, we're not opting in. I just want to make that clear to everybody.
yeah, you can't have recreational at all.
No,
With opt-in,
it's just
with us
medical marijuana, period.
Exactly.
And that's something that the state allowed, and we can't change that. But we can put conditions on it like this.
Yep.
Any other comments or concerns on this?
Good.
All right, moving on.
All right. So the last one within this packet this evening is the short-term rental ordinance. So this was prepared over the course of a couple months, working with the planning board and the public, and had some really great dialogue with the public as well. People voicing their concerns for and against short-term rentals, and just the use overall and the different types of standards that could apply. And so this is where the planning board landed. Would you like me to go page by page or section by section? Would that be helpful? I think we've discussed this
have.
briefly before, if I remember
Right, we
correctly.
were given a presentation of this, so I think, at least in some regards, we are familiar with it.
Okay.
We were given a presentation, we really hadn't had a chance to even discuss it on any level.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go section by section then. So the first section, purpose and authority. Nothing earth-shattering there. That's just more so giving the town and outlining the purpose of the ordinance and the authority that the town has and how that works. So more so on the legalese side of things. The next section is definitions. So as we saw earlier in that document where we had pulled the definitions for short-term rental and long-term rental, you'll see that language here mimicking that, as well as outlining some other definitions that we already have within our land use ordinance, such as dwelling unit and owner. And then we also included a definition for advertising as well. Chris, did you have anything on this one, or was it?
I did.
Okay.
The first one, primary residence hosted. A dwelling that is occupied by the owner when any part of the dwelling unit is rented as a short-term rental. What about a site that has a single-family structure and a detached building? So that is not owner-occupied, the owner is on site. I was wondering if we clean up the language to add something about the owner being on site rather than in the dwelling.
Yeah, this makes it sound like a host, like they're in the unit with the people or in an ADU that's attached. But if you have an ADU that's detached,
Right, yeah, I was just
you
thinking
could
about.
kind of, it's a
the
loophole that you could kind of wiggle out
I
of.
mean, we do have cases where somebody lives in the basement and they rent out the dwelling for short-term rentals, and that's meets this definition. But we have other places where somebody may have multiple cabins on a lake, and they live in a single-family dwelling, whether it's seasonal or permanent. They are on site, and they might have multiple cabins, but they're not in that dwelling. So I think we need to add a little something that,
Or change it.
or change it so
Change
that
it
it
to like-
covers on site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Owners on site.
The parcel instead of the dwelling or something like that, because
And then you just follow through with the unhosted, just make sure it's all runs
Right.
together. I like the three definitions though, because the last one, non-primary residence, unhosted, that's more like a corporation could buy a building out of state and use it as a short-term rental, and they're not on site, they're not even in state. So that should be totally different than primary residence hosted and unhosted. Because there are a lot of people that rent their camp for a couple weeks just to supplement their income to pay their taxes. So they might only operate for 2 or 3 weeks. And, we gotta treat them a little different than somebody that's a corporation out of state. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where the intent of these three came from. So, yeah, if somebody's there on the property, I think sometimes tenants will act and behave a little bit differently than if the owner is away from the property. And then, and this was something that, and we can talk about this maybe a little bit later on, but it was okay by legal to base our fee schedule on these three different types of uses as well. So if we wanted to charge more, for example, for a non-primary residence that's unhosted compared to a primary residence that is hosted, we would be allowed to have that sliding scale.
So you kind of jumped ahead of one of my other comments about the fee schedule. It's something, if we do adopt a short-term rental ordinance, I had this discussion with Glenn today, that we could do the fee schedule after. It doesn't have to be included in this warrant article.
Yeah, so sometimes you do fee schedules as a matter of policy, but if you codify the fee schedule in the ordinance, you'd likely need to amend it through the ordinance if it was part of your ordinance fee schedule.
my only problem with that non-primary residence one is there's a lot of family camps that they purposely rent it. It's not a corporation, it's not an LLC, it's not millionaires, it's just a family camp. It's definitely not their primary because it's seasonal. And that's what they've been doing for 50 to 80 years is renting those. So if you change that, if you take that and then use it later on in a different fee schedule, I don't know if that's really the intent. behind what you're talking about. I think you're handcuffed. The people that have been doing this the longest and that need it the most, I think, to keep their family camp in their family, and they rent it out during the summer so they can use it maybe September, October when it's not as valuable. That's not their primary. I think that hurts them.
I agree, Derek, and maybe the way to handle that is the amount of time they rent it out. Some of these corporations, they rent it out year-round. They're year-round residents. And I don't, this is probably a moving target, but the fee schedule thing we could talk about at length at another time. It doesn't have to be resolved to adopt this.
Yep.
But I think your point is well taken.
I mean,
We don't want to penalize people that have had family camps all, forever, and put them in the same bucket as somebody out of state buying up these camps as a corporation and renting them out for short-term rentals for, to make their annual profit.
Yep.
So it's a point well taken.
Did you have any other definitions, comments?
Oh, hold on. Well, we're just sticking with this page. How far ahead are we
Right
going? I
now.
mean, there's definitions all the way through, but we're trying to stick
This
to
is
this
section
page, right?
2.
Mine is advertising. I just know in the real estate world, not the rental world. I don't do a lot of short-term rentals or whatever with advertising, but I know in real estate world, there's third-party vendors that pull data. Like, for example, Zillow. Like, I will list a property in the MLS, and I have no control over what Zillow, Redfin, all these other places pull for data and advertise with. They do it as a third-party vendor for their own profit, and they scrape and pull stuff that is wildly inaccurate. So it's hard when somebody's going to try to advertise on whatever platform they're advertising on, and it gets scraped or pulled, and it changes somewhere else, and it looks like, I think in the end, this is where some people are going to, hopefully we can just play it by ear, or individual cases, but maybe you can see which places get pulled and they're doing it on purpose and which ones get on accident. I just see it going down a slippery slope, whether it's like, I didn't even put that in there. I don't have any control over that third-party vendor's advertising. They scraped and pulled something. It's on paper, a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, or however many beds or whatever, but it's not, we're not allowing that many people in our advertisement. Somebody else pulls it and it gets misconstrued onto another one, and now you're going to have
Couldn't we
fights
address
over
that
stuff.
throughout the rest of the ordinance? This is just a definition of what advertising is.
Yeah, I know.
But when we get to the next sections, that would be the time to say, pulling that definition isn't going to make any difference.
I don't know. I don't know if saying pulling it, but clarifying. I don't know. I guess then when you use advertising, you're going to have to use something else after if you don't clarify in the advertising definition part that kind of stuff is not going to hinder the applicant or the dwelling.
Brad or Jason, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, and maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit, but for the next section, really our focus for advertising is means of enforcement from the town and an ability to help regulate. What we want to get away from is short-term rental owners or operators advertising a space as having an occupancy for 16 where it might only have 8, and then that's a more intensive use of that individual property that may have an effect on adjacent properties. And so it was one of those things that, the town, where if we're looking and evaluating a property and renewing it, and maybe there were some issues that had come up during the past, maybe this is another tool that we can help utilize to justify our decision that, all throughout the year, your occupancy was 8 and you advertised it as such, and okay, you were a good operator. Versus, if there were more intensive uses, then, that's a discussion to be had there, I think.
So is there a way that, I think to get to what you were saying is that the owner is in control of what he puts out for advertising? What Derek's talking about is somebody taking that information and using it on another site, Zillow or Redfin, that instead of, let's say the owner says he's going to have 8 people there, they put it out for 16. I don't know, is that what?
Yeah,
Is there
is
a
that-
way to kind of reel that in, is what I'm asking?
Yeah.
I've had property listed, but other people listed it in the past incorrectly, and they'll scrape that off and pull it onto a Zillow site and say it's a 3-bedroom house. When I did my due diligence and found out it's a 2-bedroom septic, I can't advertise it as a 3-bedroom. Where that sort of thing's gonna happen here, and later on in this, there's consequences for advertising it incorrectly. So my point, which is if it gets advertised incorrectly on the millions of AI things that are out there now, get scraped and pulled, and they're gonna get in trouble and consequences for stuff that they have no control over. That's all, the only thing I'm bringing up.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I totally get that, understand that too. And I think my understanding from the relationship of the actual short-term rental owner and like those advertising websites is it's a pretty like personal relationship where they would have direct control over, how that property is listed, what that's advertised as having an occupancy for, at least the primary ones. I'm not
Right, yeah,
sure about
that's
the-
exactly.
Like,
Those, I think, you can't really argue that. It's like-
like the Airbnb.
This is connected to your Stripe account. You can't say you didn't put that in.
Right. So, but versus, some of those other third-party sites that, or if there's a scrubbing tool, for example, that maybe the town is using to pull that data from, I think that's one of those things that we can verify based on the actual application that's in with the town.
So I just want to clarify for my own use. So for instance, if we were looking at Airbnb, we would assume that that would be more accurate because the owner of the property is telling Airbnb how many it can
Right.
Yep.
have. Like,
Right.
this will, have up to 16 people. There's beds for up to 16 people. But if Zillow takes that information, if I'm getting this correctly, I didn't realize that they did advertise short-term rentals, but they could potentially misconstrue that. So we would be using something more directly from the source.
Yeah, I mean, just with our permitting software, I reached out to them. They have a contract with just Airbnb and VRBO. I imagine 95% of rentals are done through those platforms. And they directly have a contract with them, so they're not even scraping it from the web. They're getting it directly from them. So there'll be no mistake. Whatever someone gives those companies would be directly. And it seems like every company that does it, it's Airbnb and VRBO is where they're getting.
That's my kind of point, is that you guys will have oversight over, it's not just the neighbor going, I found this advertisement here, go get them. It's like, listen, we use this because it's accurate, and here it doesn't say.
Unless it's obvious that they put out like a different advertisement somewhere.
Yeah, like their own.
Yeah.
So a real world example, so during COVID, when all the bars shut down in New Jersey, a lot of the promoters that would typically do their events at clubs or bars were renting out Airbnbs for months at a time and then having thousands of people show up at beachfront homes and because there was nowhere else to go. So the owner obviously didn't want 1,000 people on his property, but an enterprising promoter, didn't care for that week and did pretty well. So, but I see what you're saying is once that's rented or whatever, you can't really control what that third party is going to do after. But
Like subletting, if somebody trying to sublet
exactly.
it out.
Right. So Jason, you were hitting on some of the programs that you've looked at.
Yep.
And it's my understanding that some of these programs, if we enact this ordinance, which I kind of look at as more of a registration of Airbnbs, not an all-inclusive ordinance about short-term rentals. So if they don't have a registration, Airbnb won't host it, correctly?
Not necessarily.
so are you talking about some of that case law with Santa Monica and stuff where
Yeah.
So technically, there have been cities who have enacted registration ordinances and then Airbnb unsuccessfully sued because they wanted to not have to list properties. They didn't want to have to ensure that they were registered, but City of Santa Monica, New York, and another were successful in requiring Airbnb to not list properties that were not registered under the local ordinance.
So maybe I was putting the cart before the house. Maybe that's something we need to look at with software.
Yeah, absolutely.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Sam is on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Hi. I will try to look for your hand if you have any additional comments. I don't know how long you've been there or listening, but do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay.
This is, you've covered everything.
All right. I'll be looking for your hand, okay?
Okay, I'll give you have my hand.
Okay. All right. And yes, jumping ahead a little bit, am I only seeing advertising in one spot? It's in D.
Yeah, for
J.
section
just-
3J, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
It's also mentioned at the end of section 2.
Yeah. The definition part.
Oh,
Yeah.
in the definition.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right. Any other comments on these sections? So I think we'd be moving on to section 3.
Okay. Yep, the next section would be the requirements for the registration and that process. So the effective period and the renewal period, the effective period would be valid for 1 year. So every year they would have to go and reapply with the town to get that renewed. Same thing with section B there for the renewal period. So annually they would have to get that reapproved and looked at with the town. And then section C is where we get into a little bit of the meat of the ordinance in terms of what actually would dictate their eligibility if they were allowed to reapply or renew. So really the key things here are, if there were performance issues, if there were occurrences of, formal noise complaints filed with the town or any violations, that would be in section C5 D. So the property has 3 or more documented and relevant instances of disturbances or violations. That's one of the primary considerations that the town would be looking at when determining if they want to renew that registration for that short-term rental.
So can we talk about that one for a sec?
Yeah.
So 3 documented and relevant instances of disturbance or violations. So let's just say there's a noise complaint. That's going to probably go to the sheriff's department. I don't know that the sheriff's department is going to notify us that there was a disturbance. So enforcing this, is it going to be put on the, one thought I had is maybe this gets put onto the owner of the property, that if they do have a call to the sheriff's department, that they're required to notify us. Because I know the sheriff's department's not going to notify us. If we have the ACO goes out there for a dog running at large, she's probably not going to let us know. She might, but not necessarily. And, somebody's setting off fireworks in the middle of the night. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on at these homes that are disturbing to the neighbors, and that could be a qualifying or a relevant instance. I just don't know how we're going to enforce that. I mean, I don't believe Jason or anybody that's employed by him is going to go out on a weekend in the middle of the night and check out a noise complaint or a bonfire too late at night or any of those things. So, most of these instances happen mostly on a weekend when we're closed. So I just see enforcement as kind of being hard to get our hands around this.
Absolutely, and it was something that we had talked about quite a bit with the planning board as well, was this question around noise and enforcement especially. I think I'd be curious if with our software that we'd be utilizing, if there's a component of that would research or look into any of the sheriff files for noise complaints, if that's something that's, I don't know if that's part of it or not.
I'm sure dispatch could give us a report if we reached out and said, do you have any calls for noise complaints?
Well, my point was maybe we make the owner responsible, that if there is an incident, he has to report it. You have the rules, the guidelines of short-term rentals is supposed to be posted in the home, and maybe one of those is that anybody that, if there's an instance, they have to report it. I'm just reaching out. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of this one, it stands out to me. I hear everything that you're saying. I feel like this is, number one, hard to enforce and very subjective. Fireworks, for instance, I'm just going to pull off your fireworks. Fireworks can be a nuisance, but they're allowed.
On certain days. In certain times.
In Raymond? We have a
Yeah.
fireworks ordinance?
No, we don't, state.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, I think like you can have them, probably more often than you would, like, it's allowed. You can call that in as a nuisance. That would be a nuisance, right? Like,
I agree.
Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I totally see
Like,
this
I'm
getting to
using-
neighbor versus
Well,
neighbor.
and I'm in
I also
agreement.
think it's subjective. So, and I also think that it can be amplified. So one instance can become more documented instances because you could amplify that. So my personal opinion is, and I know that this is, which is hard because this is one of the number one things that are creating some heartburn with short-term rentals, right? Is this idea of it's nuisance, but it's the one thing I wouldn't mind seeing taken out, I guess. And I understand, and I can understand why there was a lot of conversation around this, but I just feel like it's very subjective. So I'm not sure how you address that.
Yeah.
I don't know the workaround.
I completely agree. It's one of those, it's hard because that's what we're trying to help enforce on ones that are really egregious, but yet it's so subjective that if the neighbor just decides you have 8 people on a bonfire and they're playing music and talking too loud, then they do
call
that.
the sheriff.
They do that 3 times, and all of a sudden their neighbor's not. It's a very easy way to go, I got them.
It's a slippery slope.
It's how the waterfront community, either you love your neighbor or you can't stand your neighbor, and you'll have a dock dispute or a noise dispute, and it's just, they got to cut down that tree, I didn't. This is what stirs the entire pot of how neighbors getting along with neighbors starts, and I just see this being a very slippery slope, hard to enforce. And
So I think, I don't know how you do that. I don't know what you do. I don't know how you address it, but
I agree.
I'm having a hard time with that one in particular.
Yeah, I think the way that it's worded now, a lot of that burden would currently fall to the code enforcement officer to determine what is a relevant disturbance sort of thing. The reason, though, for including it was the alternative is if it was not in there, then how is there a fair way that we can look at the rest of these criteria and renew that short-term rental? And the reason why it was 3 or more documented was at least there's like a threshold that we can work off of, and might make his job a little bit easier, but it still, again, falls mostly to that code enforcement officer.
It's easy manipulated. That's what I don't like, and it puts him. It's in a no-win situation for the code enforcement. You basically setting him up to fail or throwing him under the bus right from the beginning, no matter what. Because one neighbor's going to go, they were so loud, and the other neighbor's going to be like, I had 5 people, and we were hanging around, we were laughing at the bonfire at 9:30 at night. Yeah, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's why we paid $5,000 to come here for the week, and he's gonna be, no matter what, the bad guy.
And
I mean, he signed up for it. But.
And to Kayla's point about the fireworks that I brought up, 4th of July, we all expect it. I live on a lake, and I listen to the fireworks going on all night long, the whole week of 4th of July. It's just something we live with. But if you're one of these people that lives on a private road and you've got this thing's rented out all summer long, and that week of 4th of July turns to every week, I get it. I can't. I don't know how we can get our arms around it either, Kayla. It's a tough one. I get your point. It's subjective, and I agree with what you're saying. I see both sides. I just think the planning board tried to, like Brett said, is to put some kind of parameters, because we want to renew these licenses annually, and we have to have some criteria. So if there's bad actors in town, we don't want to renew their license or have them have a pause until they become a good actor. how you get people to be good neighbors. We've been trying to, I've been in code enforcement 20 years. Nobody knows the answer to that.
Exactly.
This is just a more magnified issue than most. We're babysitters most of the
Yeah,
time.
I'm wondering, because part of this, like, let's say you've rented it and you just have a rowdy group for a week. There's your 3 complaints, but the rest of the year is fine. I don't know, is there like, within a time frame,
I think the 3 strikes was per year.
The thing that we had when we discussed this too was, they tried to find if this was an issue. I remember that they discussed this because I asked the last time we were here, and it's like, is this a huge issue in the town where there are a lot, noise complaints, fireworks, cops getting called, all that. And when they did call and find out or pull the reports, it wasn't a huge issue. So that's another thing that is like, we're kind of creating a solution for a problem that's not a giant problem in this town. And that's one of those things that was brought up.
It's a big issue to the people that live next door to the bad actors, but we don't have a lot of bad actors, considering we have probably a couple hundred short-term rentals from what the numbers I've looked at. I don't know if I'm in the right ballpark, but I think I'm close.
I would assume, yeah.
You peak in August at like 250.
250. So I think maybe we've got half a dozen bad actors out of that. So you're somewhat accurate that we don't have a lot of problems.
did the planning board explore any sort of timing on these? For instance, like, as opposed to 3 over the whole year, like
I think it was, right?
3, well, this would be for the whole year. That's how
Yeah.
I would read it, because these
Yeah.
are for
Yeah.
registration for the year. So like I said, in the instance of you have 1 week of just a rowdy group, there's your 3. But the rest of it doesn't seem fair to pull someone's ability to provide a short-term rental just because they probably had a bad experience with that group as well, and probably wouldn't rent to them again,
And,
right?
yeah, to
so
that-
they're losing out on a year to people they probably wouldn't rent to out again. If they're sort of a rowdy group. So is there a way to word it like over a period of, I don't know, 6 weeks, 12 weeks? I don't know the number. I'm just curious, would that be a way to sort of parse that out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably base it off of that actual rental period. So if there was a violation that occurred, or 3 or more instances of a violation that occurred for that specific rental period.
Like outside
Not- yeah,
of
or,
your,
like each rental period itself would be its own
would only
individual.
count as an
standalone.
instance?
Right,
But
correct.
how do we know that?
So to her point, my wife used to do this in her previous life, was a rental agent for one of the local agencies, and you would get blacklisted if there was they don't want it on them either. They don't want it on their agency. The homeowner doesn't want it. They don't want these bad apples coming back no matter what. So if there is that instance where the cops do get called, or the neighbors are pissed, or they have a million cars up and down the road or whatever, they get those people out of there, because it's bad for business all the way around.
Yeah, it
for the
affects their
homeowner and the
ratings.
rental company and the neighbor, like everybody. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
So in one night, to you guys' point, you could have 6 or 7 violations. You could have parking violations. You could have
easily.
too many people staying the night, too many guests. You could have
Drunk fireworks.
drunk fireworks, illegal fire in the fire pit. You're supposed to have a permit.
Dog running down there.
Dog running down. You could have all these things in just one bad apple. So I agree. I mean, this is a difficult. Every town in the country's grappling with this. We're not alone. We're not different. And I don't know if anybody's come up with a perfect solution. So I think, these are the things we need to discuss.
And then, since we're sort of going over this, for public health, safety, and welfare issues, do these just come out of, let's say, someone renting these calling and saying, hey, this place is out of code, or this place is dangerous, or I'm falling through the floor here, or do they come about through inspections that are a little further down here?
Probably
Or
both.
both? Okay.
Yeah, initially, probably because there should be an initial inspection there to make sure smoke detectors, egress windows, all that stuff. after that, we got a call. It wasn't for a short-term rental, but somebody, the water ran dry and they were getting colored water out of the sink. So, something like that. It's going to come from the renter occasionally if they know where to reach out.
Or another safety issue would be the septic system fails, something like that.
Another question that I have on that is this, I think, I asked this the first time, I believe, and I'm trying to remember correctly, but we are doing, code enforcement's doing inspection upon application for short-term rental. You guys are gonna go through. That particular property was built in 1953. You do not need to bring it up to current code, right? But because you're talking about egress windows and that kind of stuff. So if you had an old L.C. Andrews log cabin, there's no way to retrofit that easily without ruining the integrity
Right,
of that
unless it
can.
was obvious that they had converted something to a bedroom
Yeah,
after the fact.
okay.
Something
That's
like
fair.
that. But if anything looks original, I think we have to kind of use some, I hate to see the term common sense,
Yep.
but, understanding that at the time, this building was,
Common sense is a good term. You can use it, definitely.
Yeah, I think the intent with that one was that those structures would be held to the ordinances or
Of that time.
building
whatever.
code of whatever time
Okay,
period it
perfect.
was.
That's what I thought I asked
So,
before. But
Back to the common sense thing. So I can say Jason has common sense, but he's not going to be sitting there forever. The next guy comes in, may not have common sense, and then he goes by the letter of the law. You could find them saying you need egress windows, you need to upgrade the building. That's just.
well, then I would change this to make it very clear that it should go as
the codes that were applicable at the time
at
when
the
the
time
work was
at the
done.
time of the build. Or remodel, or whatever. If they
Right.
remodel an addition, then it's got to go to that time frame.
Yeah.
You can't do a 2003.
Well, one
But
could
you already
argue
got-
you've changed the use, though. If it was used as a primary dwelling, then they don't need to make any changes.
But
now you're changing it to a rental.
But you're not changing it. This could have been what I'm saying is if this was rented from 1950 till now,
Oh, that's a different story.
and then how are you going to prove it when this is?
They're kind of grandfathered, right?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But this is put in effect in 2025. How are you going to prove that you are grandfathered as you rented for that many years?
I can't answer that one.
Oh, I'm just this is.
I know.
I'm giving
That's
you the
why-
trouble.
I
You
know,
guys
I
got
get
to
it.
do the
That's-
fixing.
You're being the devil's advocate. That's what you're supposed to do.
I just don't want to get into another whole solar ordinance problem where we create an ordinance we can't figure out and we can't police and it's a bad look when we have people come in and go, well, what does this mean? This is this, the gray area and all that. And it's like, well, we as a town creating an ordinance that doesn't make sense or work, then it just looks bad on us. I'd rather have it pretty bulletproof going in.
Are there any other comments on this page 9 in our, I guess it's on our packet, looking at it through that way? Are we ready to move on to section D? Or not?
So we're on page 10. Let's see, I might have had a comment. Well, I just had a comment on the fees. We kind of already covered it. Is it going to be the same for all or tiered? And I think we decided it was going to kind of be tiered depending on the situation. Is that right?
Yeah, and the beauty of this is that it just references the fee schedule. So whatever we want to put in that fee schedule, maybe it's that multiplier system of that type of classification multiplied by the frequency of use, however we want to make that look. At least in this ordinance, we're making that reference to the fee schedule. We can figure that out separately.
My other comment was on inspections. It says the short-term rental shall be inspected by the code enforcement officer, fire inspector, and other appropriate town officials. I think instead of code enforcement officer, fire inspector, it should be one or the other. I don't think we need to have duplicative inspections on a building. We're looking at life safety. So that could be something that we could tweak.
Page 5. I thought she asked where we were. Page 5.
Derek, did you have any comments overall in this section?
I do on D4. I brought it up last time. I just want to bring it up again.
On the insurance?
On the insurance. It's a very long worded definition of insurance that some of this I don't think is going to be able to be insurable the way it's written.
And again, it may
It's
be
a
burden.
huge paragraph going all the way through what, like, I think if you bring this to an insurance company and go, hey, I need to be up with compliance with the town rating and I need insurance that covers this, they're gonna be like, yeah, we don't have a specific thing that's you're even gonna get for that.
So I'm seeing here that you either have to have it or prove that you have coverage through the hosting platform. So is that typical? I'm not well versed in how Airbnbs and Verbos work. Do they typically have sort of a blanket coverage? Are you signing up for that, or how does that work?
Yeah, my understanding is that they would. And I think, Derek, the issue that might be later on, and I think this was discussed at the planning board level too, is the intent was that the property itself is insured. So if a septic does back up into Sebago Lake, there's obviously damages and costs that are incurred there, but the insurance is more so to make sure that that property owner is covered to be able to replace that septic system on site. I think where we get into that world of if we're requiring people to insure places outside of their property, I think that's where the challenge probably arises from an insurance perspective.
I just think it should be cleaner and shorter so that you can actually insure it and specify that, it needs to
Take
be
out the $1 million.
this dwelling, and it's very long and it's hard. We've gotten emails from lots of different people, insurance people, as well as residents that have, voiced either yes or no on this whole thing. And there's been a few that have come to the terms on this one. And one was even a person who does insurance, and they were like,
Quick Google, Airbnb covers hosts up to $1 million, but for bodily injury, damage, theft to the property, and damage caused by guest. It doesn't cover damage or injury resulting from something done intentionally, or damage to your place or belongings caused by a guest. That's covered under damage protection, and then there's other exclusions. But generally it's $1 million for the host through the platform.
So that maybe could be dressed up. Some additional language for that.
yeah, I hear intentionally in there though. And then somebody that flushes the wrong thing down the toilet, they're like, oh, you did that intentionally. You knew that you're not supposed to do that. And you're going to court. I just think it needs to just be clean and short and sweet. The more stuff that gets thrown in there, the easier it is to fight it and prove that it's.
So are you basically suggesting, and I'm just wondering, I'm just looking through this paragraph that, I don't know, it looks like it's the last sentence, the owner must have insurance to cover the cost associated for repair of the property and surrounding property, or surrounding.
Yeah, I mean, and then it gives examples. For example, if short-term rental is located along Sebago Lake and the septic fails and backs up and pollutes the water of the lake, and owners must have insurance to cover the costs associated with repairs for the property and surrounding properties impacted by the damage. The owner must maintain such insurance coverage while renting. You hand that off to an insurance company, and they're gonna be like, well, I'm not insuring your property, this property, the neighbor's property, the water's property, everybody's property that it infects. It's just not, it's not feasible.
Are we not saying enough if we just say the owner must maintain sufficient insurance coverage? Because, again, that's kind of
That's pretty simple.
pretty simple. I mean, it's
Exactly.
pretty simple, but at the same time, I don't know.
Might be enough.
Or is that too simple?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it keeps us off the hook. It's like, you gotta have insurance, okay, you check that box, you showed proof of insurance, I mean, let's move on. But the more we try to then we're on the hook. We don't have the insurance because we didn't look into making sure that their whole policy, you're gonna read through their whole policy and make sure it covers.
Well,
that
here's
long
a
word
good
that we
example
put in.
of something I dealt with, not related to a short-term rental. We had a long-term rental burn down. Owner owned the house outright, cash. Didn't insure the property.
Yeah.
So we, as the town, ended up having to go in, do the dangerous building ordinance, lien it, go through that special assessment process. Get 4 years later, you're getting your money back after they auction the lot. Ended up being a non-conforming lot. So we got a new parking lot. So that was the outcome. So having an insurance requirement might help for people who own their houses outright, and if they go, if they're risk tolerant and choose not to insure their property while also renting it out. Because if it does burn down and you end up with a partial structure, we'll typically have to knock it down, and or the fire department will knock it down, and we lean it and go through that whole process.
I get the purpose of it. I just know we also don't go around asking for everybody else's insurance.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just have proof of insurance as part of the application process. That
I think the intent of this is for that situation, a property that's been in the family for years that has no mortgage on it. They might not have insurance, and this is kind of a check mark to say, oh, by the way, to do what you want to do, you have to have insurance. Can you show us proof of insurance?
And when it comes to the select board for their license, if we look at their proof of insurance and it seems inadequate, we could address it at that time.
That's an interesting comment you just made. So we will have to approve all the licenses for these?
I think so.
So 250 odd?
Mhm.
Because they'd be registered as a business?
Am I right, Brett? Is it the selectman or the code office?
So the code enforcement officer
Yep.
would be the one responsible for granting approval or approval with conditions.
But then we grant the license?
So this would just be for
There is-
registration.
There's no license.
There's no, yeah, there's
We're
no-
just registering.
Okay, all right. So, Jason, you're up.
It's kind of is a license though, because it's a registration certificate.
I know.
Because you're pulling the certificate away if they do something, because you can't pull a registration, it's like,
Wait a minute, aren't we the ones that renew it annually?
I don't know, I think,
don't
no,
think
I would
so.
say they
Not how
do.
it's written.
No, and I think there's just gonna be the one
is
inspection.
why
so
it's
after
kinda
It's just gonna be a paperwork
It's still not a
type of
business,
thing.
but you're treating it like one, like a pseudo business.
So you're not gonna, this would be a one-time inspection.
The first time inspection, yeah,
So you'll be very busy the first year,
right, and then after that, it'll be more of a paperwork thing.
paperwork thing. Because, I mean, my whole thought too is this also, I don't even know if you have the capacity with some of these things to enforce or
250
to.
inspections.
I mean,
April.
half-hour inspection, I mean, probably do, 5, 6 a day, so take you about a couple months, if that's the number.
I agree with the inspection piece, that maybe it could read code enforcement officer or, I don't know what the wording would be, but, so it could be divvied up. Although, would a fire inspector know about the size of a window, or would they be like curious? Like,
No.
Is that, I mean,
They'll-
they're gonna know, right?
They'll know the egress, yeah.
So can it say, and or
Yeah, or their designee.
or there doesn't, yeah, to
life
split
safety
that
personnel.
250 rush of,
I mean, the other,
50 days of inspections, and then,
Well-
it's like you guys have 50 random days that you're not doing absolutely anything right now.
not usually. The wintertime maybe, but we wouldn't be doing inspections in the winter probably. I mean, I know that the iWorks, our permitting software, they have a self-inspection, whether we want to trust people to test all their smoke detectors, and, they can just check them off. Oh, yeah, smoke detectors work, but they may not be working.
Kind of, yeah, I mean, you have to look at the problem you have right now too, versus the ease of, or the burden putting on you guys. If you're not having a huge issue right now, maybe you'd self-do it until they're, I don't know. It might help relieve
Right.
some of that off of
Right.
you guys, but if there was people dying left and right over short-term rentals, then, I would say, no, you gotta go out and put eyes on it on every single one, but.
I mean, if someone's received a certificate of occupancy in the last so many years, maybe you say, okay, that house is up to code, but that's maybe not fair to everybody if somebody else is being inspected and then somebody else just because they're 3 years old. House 3 years old.
all right, any other thoughts and comments on this section? or I guess it's a continuation of
Yeah, it's just,
section 3. Or sort of ready to
No,
move on
yeah.
to section 4, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
saying.
yeah.
Okay. Section 4 would be our performance standards for how they should operate. So they would be required to provide an emergency contact who the town could reach out to if there were issues on site. Occupancy was one that was discussed, and we had gone back and forth quite a bit with the planning board on how we derived that. What we ended up with was differentiating between how many individuals would be sleeping there versus during the day if that short-term rental was used to host a party, for example, like a birthday party. That's where the board felt it was a little bit different to differentiate between, who's actually sleeping there versus, using the property during the day. Again, parking, so like we discussed earlier, we do have that external reference to our land use ordinance for the off-street parking requirements. Trash disposal, pretty cut and dry, essentially just needing trash receptacles on site. You don't want to see trash on the property. Habitability, they would need the obviously the approval from the code enforcement officer. Signage would need to comply with our land use ordinance. Subletting and event hosting, we did land with that it should be unlawful to sublet the actual short-term rental or to host external events of those sorts. And then the last one would be the distribution of the Good Neighbor flyer. So there was a draft application form that had those Good Neighbor guidelines attached with that on that last page there. And so they would be required to post that within the actual property. And those would be the performance standards.
I actually like quite a few of these. I like the parking, the trash, and the good neighbor. I know some of the companies do the good neighbor thing as part of their check-in package, which is nice. They've been doing it for years. Trash is great because you have a Tuesday pickup, but most rentals are gonna go whatever, Saturday to Saturday or Sunday to whatever. And then whose responsibility is it? They're gonna leave it out from Sunday until Tuesday, and the crows get in it, and the skunks and raccoons, like that's annoying. So I think those two are really good. Not having parking up and down the streets is one of the real big ones. I like that. So it's for emergency vehicles can get in and out to other people's properties, down camp roads and things like that. I think the only two I don't like are the daytime occupancy limits, because it's kind of like a residential rental can have a big birthday party or graduation party at their house. They have no regulations on this, but short-term rentals, you might be renting one of those for one of those places, even though you live in town or live somewhere around. I mean, it doesn't matter where you live, I guess, but you're going to use it, a residential rental one, in the same capacity of somebody who lives on a lake. My grandparents used to live on a lake, and I had a graduation, party at everybody wanted to come there because it was at the lake. So you're going to have that on a residential rental just as much as you're going to have it on a short-term rental. So I think maximizing that it's not an everyday occurrence. It's like a once in a while thing, and they go away at night. Then the only one other question I had was on the occupancy. I know same thing with an old maybe L.C. Andrews log cabin that got done back in the day before there was any occupancy. What are you going to do with those? That's more of a question than a concern.
I have the same concern. Who's going to enforce? You got to have, if you've got a 4-bedroom, you can only have a 2 guests per bedroom,
Yes.
plus 4 adults. How are we going to enforce that?
Yeah, you have to go inside. Well, I guess
we're going to go inside and then count people and outside, and I just see that difficult to enforce.
yeah.
I don't think we can enforce it, but if we notice they're advertising for more.
No, but this would be a daytime party. That's what. So if somebody.
I think the parking might actually kind of
Right, that's what I
catch
mean.
that
Kind of.
somewhat.
That's why some of these are redundant. Like you created this, and I think that nips it in the butt more than, some of these other ones. And I think it's just more. How are you going to say it's okay for this guy to do it, but not this guy to do
And
it?
it's easy to see the
Straight
cars
face.
on the road. Somebody can take a picture of that pretty
Yeah.
easily, and that's kind of easily
Exactly.
quantifiable.
And you're kind of messing with the law twice by doing that.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to you're having way too many people here. Like, now it's time to tone it down. I think the parking gets rid of that occupancy limit part of it. But yeah, I mean, I love the trash, the parking, and the good neighbor flyer. I think those are all positives that come out of this. The subletting I kind of had a question on too. I know, not that it's good or bad. I know a lot of people do that though on purpose. Is they sublet. I guess it's more with long-term rentals, I guess, than short-term. So it's not.
I think this actually protects property owners somewhat rather than them renting it out.
Yeah.
Then that
They
person
probably
trying to
want it.
rent it out on top of
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. I think that's probably saving both parties, the neighbors and the homeowners.
One of my issues was the emergency contact. The owner must provide an emergency contact who's able to respond in a timely manner, not to exceed 24 hours. Well, in 24 hours, a lot of these problems are going to be gone, like the parking, or could be the noise, or so. I think it shouldn't be 24 hours. It should be any time they should be available. You're renting your property out, you should be available. The next day it's not going to matter. It's over.
Yeah, I think the reason why we added that was, I don't think we had it in there before, and I think the language was, she'll be able to respond in a timely manner, and then it was, okay, what's
What's the timely
manner? Is it a week? Is it a, that kind of thing? So at least that was that intention of adding that in there.
I don't think the intent was say, do it in 24 hours. It was as soon as possible, you have up to the 24 hours.
Yeah, at 25, you're in trouble. From 0 to 24, get on it.
Any other comments for this section?
No, I'm good.
All right, last one. Oh, nope, second to last.
Yep, so the last three, section 5, 6, and 7. So section 5 would be the complaints, penalties, violations, and enforcement. Most of this is pretty standard language, kind of references some other land use ordinance, how the code enforcement officer operates, how they would issue those violations, how they would go out and actually enforce that. And then section 6, every violation, they have the right to appeal that decision. So that language, again, is pretty standard where, if there was an appeal, that would go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then that last section, severability, just making sure that we're differentiating this ordinance from all the other ordinances, so.
I guess for me personally, these are my same thoughts regarding the complaints and the 3 notices.
Yep. Same on that. And it also looks like it's a ton of work for Jason, but again, he signed up for it.
Yeah, ultimately, when it comes to short-term rentals, enforceability is usually the number one question. Who's going to be responsible, who at the town level, and usually it does fall to the code enforcement officer, and so
And
or
like
their
he's-
designee. So
And like he said, it's very subjective, and then you have someone with common sense now that's doing great, but who knows, 5-10 years, if you get somebody that
right.
is not, then it's a lot tougher.
Yeah, and again, the beauty of it is just like today, if Jason goes to issue a violation and that property owner feels like, maybe Jason wasn't acting with common sense, they do have that ability to appeal it and take that to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's quite the process, but it's the way our wonderful government works.
People will appeal anything.
They do, yeah.
But that's the thing, if you have it so it's black and white, it's harder to appeal, or it's easier to go to appeals and be like, man, it's pretty simple, guys. You didn't do this. But when you make it a kind of a gray area ordinance, then it's like, now you're just rolling the dice on
Right.
who's gonna interpret what.
Last section, I know we kind of already just talked about what happens. No, you can appeal.
Yep. Yeah, we have the appeals and the severability clause in there as well for sections 6 and 7. So.
All right, overall thoughts? Maybe.
Overall thoughts? We made a lot of comments.
Yeah, I went through it pretty thoroughly. I think
I'm just thinking from an implementation standpoint, and I don't know if this is more of a question for you, Jason. When we used to do our rental registration ordinance, I can't remember exactly when registration was open for a period of time and then it would close. And then our 4 property inspectors, basically the month of February, would just do rental registration inspections. So like if you had a fee structure and it was cost neutral, could you have a window of 2 weeks where you deputize some inspectors and you, the fire inspector and deputy code officer, you could hammer out all the inspections like in a 2-week period. Also, if you peak in August with 297 rentals, you know, is the off-season better for them where you don't have inspectors coming into the house like when they're fully booked through August or September? I'm just thinking from like a
I think in
practicality
Maine, it's probably
standpoint.
like November is the best time to go, because February you can't do anything.
Thanksgiving is about when everything falls off.
Exactly, so I think that's the easiest time. There's not a ton of snow, hopefully, at that point, and you can get around all the places, but I think December through end of March, you're
Yep.
go on trying to get to camp roads and lakefront property.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a registration window and an inspection window where you kind of hammer them all out, or
That might make sense, and we can kind of prioritize doing the ones that are difficult to get to in times when we know the weather is more conducive to getting in there.
The only trouble with doing it in the winter is a lot of these places aren't even open.
They're closed up.
You
Yeah,
got
the
this-
plumbing goes, yeah, it's true.
They've got the water
We
drain.
winterize a
There's
lot
nobody-
and we're
A
done.
lot of these are seasonal.
Right. I guess you could give people a break if you get in the wintertime, like your registration is X amount, it's, it's
Or you could do go
20
to the
bucks a
self,
month, it's a little less.
you try the self-registering thing until
Yeah.
there's issues.
so even without a registration period, if these roads are inaccessible and boarded up, you may get slammed with inspections a certain time of year anyway, because people will be calling, hey, I want to schedule my inspection. House is open, let's go.
Yeah. My guess that would be like April, May. Yeah.
Well, I think, obviously a lot of time was put into this. And I know there was a lot of comment and a lot of feedback. I think it does address in the comprehensive plan that the select board would be exploring a tracking or registration system, so I think we're holding true to that. I do have, just overall feeling that this is sort of operational performance heavy and standards, and whether I question whether we have the capacity to actually follow through with this. And I would hope that however this sort of ends up, that at least we have a fee schedule that would at least cover any software cost and staff time, that we think about that and say, okay, we really need to make sure we're covering this. So those are my final.
And what was the planning board's final thoughts, votes on it?
My takeaway was
We didn't really
that
get any
they
recommendations.
didn't recommend or not recommend. It was just pass it along to the select board. That's the takeaway I got. I don't know if Brett, if you would characterize it differently.
I heard there was like a 4-to-1 thing, but Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was more so, I think it was Bob that
Yeah.
might have voted against it, but he felt that they should send it with recommendation
Right.
over, but the motion that was made was to send it without any for or against recommendation. I think the conversation that was held, that it was passed on from the select board, and so now they're giving it back to the select board.
So there wasn't a vote at all?
No, that there was a vote to send it
So
to
this
you
is like
folks,
cool
just without any for or against recommendation.
I don't,
That was the 4-1 for saying we
Yeah.
don't recommend.
is it three? I'm not hung up on that because I think ultimately all of the work that we do, should be putting our best effort forward and letting voters decide. So, ultimately, like, it's not about what I think is right or what this person thinks is right versus this person. It's collectively as a whole, how do we feel about it? And I think our role is to sort of ask some of those questions, play devil's advocate, and try to get the language and the best that we can. And ultimately, that's let off for people to decide whether.
Right, I agree with that,
So
but we,
I'm okay with the planning board taking that sort of, hey, we've done our best. This
Yes.
is where we're at.
kind of, but I think we have, with budget finance and with planning board, we have purposely on there, board recommends, planning board recommends, and then select board recommends. And then on the budget finance side, we have budget finance recommends or doesn't recommend, and then select board recommends or doesn't.
Do we do that for all the ordinances?
Yeah,
as
we do
well?
it for all the, yeah. And we don't have that for this one, and it's, I mean, they're the professionals on this, is why we have that board. So for to not have it recommended, sounds like they don't like it either, to me, but.
So my pause is, there was an awful lot of comments tonight about things that may be improved in the warrant article.
Mhm.
This is right now scheduled to be voted on the 24th, correct?
You have up until the 10th. That's when we would need to finalize the
So-
warrant articles.
I'm wondering if maybe we allow, I don't know if we send it back to the planning board or allow staff to come up with some recommended changes that we discussed tonight. I just feel like we're rushing it a little bit.
I guess I feel a little differently about that. Like, I feel like it's been through, its due process.
Mhm.
And we've given some rather minor sort of feedback, and comments, which I think could feasibly be put together for next week.
By the planner in the code office?
I don't know. I mean.
That's what I'm asking.
I'm
Because if they feel they're capable of doing it, I'm fine with that. But if not, it needs to go back to the planning board, and that's going to hold this up for a bit.
Well, I guess my question too, and Glenn, maybe you could answer this, or maybe it's a question for legal. If we do alter this document, does that need to go back before the planning board anyways? And do they have to host a public hearing for it?
I'll get you a more solid answer, but in my past experience, my charter would have technical review by the planning board. They would send it as part of the process, but then it was ultimately up to the next governing body what ended up as the ordinance.
Right.
So they could say, yeah, we don't like what you put forward, or we do. So I think the select board has the ability to make revisions, because again, ultimately, it's going to the voters. And if you ended up with nothing, you would probably have a citizen's petition with legislation to put something on the ballot anyway. So I think, at least just from the context in the last couple months, is this was both boards' attempt to get something in front of the voters because there was an appetite for something.
So what I'm hearing is, I think that the changes that we're talking about are de minimis changes.
I don't
And-
think they're.
Right, and I think we
Yeah.
could allow staff to do that, get us a draft for maybe the 24th. I don't know if that's too quick. And that, April what we need?
April 10th would be the
April
last
10th.
meeting opportunity to finalize.
So we got a little bit of time.
Do you want to run through your notes real quick, just to make sure we got the change log, and read it back to them?
Yeah, so for the short-term rental ordinance specifically, it's sounding like
Yep.
here, So I think for our definitions, we would have some clarifications between the primary residence hosted, primary residence unhosted, and non-primary residence unhosted, to include language more about the ownership and the actual tract of land rather than just tied to that actual structure. I know we had talked about advertising, but I didn't mark down any actual edits to the proposed definition. Derek, did you have any specific things there?
No, I mean, I think if we have common sense code enforcement, we should be okay with that.
Okay. Then
I mean, could we just say as advertised by the owner? Something like that. That way it takes out the potential for a
Well,
third
not-
party to pull something and then it shows up somewhere as.
Kind of, but if you're
erroneous.
saying advertised by the owner and they're doing it through Airbnb, I mean, technically they are the
Right,
ones,
right,
but they're not. I guess technically they're not the ones
Right,
putting it
yeah,
on.
yes.
I mean, this is,
No.
this isn't a problem until it's a problem, and then the lawyers can decide and whatever, but I'm just, might as well bring it up now, and if somebody has an easy solution, great, if not.
Okay.
Oh, well.
So that was it for section 2. For section 3, for C5D, Kayla, it sounded like you were particularly interested in adding in there that we're basing that off of the actual rental period, when that would constitute that, or if we're just
At a
removing that.
minimum.
Yeah, same.
I mean, at a minimum,
Okay.
because I get why it's in there completely, and
Right.
it's sort of the whole point of this whole process. But I'm nervous that it's too much,
Right, yeah.
and I think that was a
Yeah,
general
I think
consensus
so,
for the
too.
rest of us.
Okay. And then on the next page for the insurability, I'll have to look back at maybe some other different ordinances. I think most of this language came from Falmouth, if I remember correctly, and I think maybe Cape Elizabeth might have had something similar in there too. But I'll look and see if maybe there's a little bit more simple language that we could,
Concise.
yeah,
Yep.
just shorten that up a little bit. For inspections, it would be code enforcement officer or their designee, life safety personnel. I'll figure out the exact language for that one. And then I think for the latter part of that, clarifying as well for the codes in which they're applicable for that time of construction for the actual structure. And then for section 4, did we want to remove the 24-hour period?
I do, I think you're gonna have a residential rental, a residential property and I don't see how you can say yes to one and no to the other on that part of it, I mean, but I'm just one person.
For the 24 hours to respond?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant the daytime,
Oh, sorry.
Don't-
Yep.
where are you?
Don't most places have a minimum like of 3-night
4A.
stays or 4-night stays, or don't most places have?
Yeah, they wanted to get rid of the minimum number. I remember that discussion. They didn't want to have any
Well,
minimum stay.
I guess I'm in a roundabout way trying to get to the fact that if there is a problem, theoretically, the problem is still there. So within 24 hours,
Oh, yeah,
I guess
I
that's what I'm
gotcha.
trying to get around. I'm sorry.
yeah, I
It's
know
my
what you
brain
mean.
working through like,
No, that makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, I see the need to put a time frame on it.
If it gets too crazy, it's other people are getting involved, like cops, fire department. Like if somebody has a bonfire, I don't think your emergency handyman is gonna go down there and fix it and, whatever. You're gonna be calling, same thing with, if there's a leak, you're gonna be calling an emergency plumber. I mean, there's.
Right.
I agree with her. If this is more of an issue, they're gonna be easy to get there.
I feel like the 24 hours covers the range of the types of rentals you have. You have the more business, that this is all that's happening. They probably have people on, I don't want to say like staff, but they have companies that are going to handle these things and respond very quickly. And then this would cover the mom and pop who are just renting it out and may need a little bit more time to respond.
Yeah, generally that's how it would go. Yeah, if it was their own personal residence, they're probably the ones that are the emergency contact, and if they're local, they'll be able to respond versus,
I mean, this is like when you call the town office and the town office tells you if this is a real emergency, call 911. Like, that's kind of what we're
Right.
doing here.
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Yep. So I think that's okay.
Yeah.
24.
I can go with that after discussion.
Okay, so we'll keep that. And then for occupancy, I guess I had a question mark here. So did we want to remove that last sentence about the maximum daytime occupancy? Or do we want to have a little bit more discussion on that, I guess?
I do, but I mean, you have a if you have a 2-bedroom house, you can only have 8 people there during the day.
I'm kind of agreeing because the parking additionally helps with these things.
Okay.
I don't know, Chris.
I agree with you. The parking does kind of solve it. They can only have so many cars.
I mean, because you have a bunch of kids running around and they're not the problem, you know? Yeah, you might have a car that can fit
Well,
4
it's an
people in it.
enforcement nightmare anyway.
Yeah, well, 100%, and it's only gonna happen on.
So if
on
we
the
take
weekends.
out
This is
You guys aren't
lakeside,
working.
then
They're gonna go
it's a
down.
bunch of little kids.
bunch of
They're-
kids using
they're
the
going
beach.
pee in the lake anyway.
So their occupancy is going to still be limited to their septic system, correct?
The overnight guests.
Yeah, that's
Overnight guests. So if we take out the 2 guests plus 4 adults, I don't think that matters. 'Cause the parking will cover that, and the septic will cover that.
Yeah, I think we touched on this briefly. I think there's other components of this that are probably more,
You
they
get 'em.
probably regulate this type of use a lot more than like some of these actual provisions, like parking and septic, are largely going to drive what can limit the,
Right.
or what limits the site.
So I think you could take it out. I'm good with that.
Okay. All right, so removing that last sentence then for maximum daytime, we'll take that out. And then that's all the changes that I had marked up. Is there any that I missed?
Nope.
Okay.
The certificate of occupancy one, if it was before that, I don't know why that one's, I think there's so many more ordinances in the town that take care of that, don't they? What
So
was the
maybe
point
one of the
that, I guess?
solutions could be that when codes or whoever does the inspection, we give them an occupancy permit based on what we find at that inspection.
Yep.
It's not going to be a thorough C of O like a regular new building, but you could give them occupancy
Will I have
permit
some type of registration,
based on what your inspection finds.
something, a registration, just like a C of O, but a registered short-term rental.
That's what I mean.
occupancy.
Maybe take
So
this
maybe
out and
take the
change
C
that
of
to
O out.
the certificate of registration
Right, yeah.
for your short-term rental.
Then they would get out of that code
Right, because
problem
you're gonna,
with the LC Andrew home.
because you're gonna have a ton of these old
Oh, you are?
camps that there wasn't even a code enforcement.
And they don't have
back
to
in
bring it
19
up to code.
Right.
Right.
And the only other one was the complaints, but it's tied into the other one we already talked about, so I don't, hopefully that fixes that part, I would assume.
Sam, did you have any comments?
No, I don't at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right,
You got it.
I think we do. Are we okay to adjourn?
I am.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn? I think we have to,
I don't know that we need to, but I'll make a motion we adjourn. Derek?
Second, all in favor? All right, thank you.